Welcome to the hidden corners where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
Now, this is Book 4 still, the Wolfman Chronicles, Chapter 3, The Lake of the Headless Man. This all takes place in Canada, if you remember right. The legend. The 200-mile gorge has become infamous due to a number of gruesome deaths and many disappearances, earning itself the eerie name, the Valley of the Headless Men. Anomalies first began in 1908 when the McLeod brothers came prospecting for gold in the valley. Nothing was heard or seen of the brothers for a whole year till their decapitated bodies were found near a river. 9 years later, the Swiss prospector Martin Jorgensen was next to succumb to the valley when his headless corpse was found. And in 1945, a miner from Ontario was found in his sleeping bag with his head cut from his shoulders. While skeptics of an unknown power at work in the valley would put the grisly mutilations down to feuding gold prospectors or hostile Indians, there are other strange happenings in the area which add to the valley's mysteriousness. The fiercely renowned Naha tribe simply vanished from the area a few years prior to the first deaths. Other Indians of the area have avoided the valley for centuries, claiming an unknown evil haunts it. Many parts of the valley remain unexplored, and there are tales the valley holds an entrance to the hollow earth. Others believe the valley is home to a lost world, with lush greenery and a tropical climate, due to the hot springs generating warm air, as well as untapped gold mines and wandering Sasquatch. While a haven for Bigfoot remains unlikely, one thing is for certain. Something strange lurks in the Nahanni Valley. Many believe it is the Wahila, the giant white wolf and cousin to the dire wolf and the werewolf. The morning started out bad and only got worse from there. Alex Smirnoff had driven most of the night while the young lad snored soundly in the back seat of the rental car. The boy was tied up, loosely enough to be comfortable, but tight enough to control him should he try anything stupid. Alex didn't intend on hurting the boy unless he had to. The threats he had made to the grandfather were merely to get his attention. Now, growing up in Russia, Alex had been allowed to watch a few old cowboy and Indian movies that were so popular in the United States. He loved to imitate the gunfights, and he begged his father for a cowboy hat, which he was never given. For many years, he believed the United States was littered with towns with dirt streets, saloons, and cowboys. Everyone rode horses, and gunfights in the streets were just an everyday occurrence. Joseph Stalin was a huge fan of American Western movies. That's the only reason Alex had been allowed to watch them. Though Stalin had been dead for several years by the time Alex was born, Alex's father still had fond memories of the nights he had been asked to watch countless hours of Western cinema as one of Stalin's underlings. There was a time when Stalin would call his subordinates at all hours of the night and tell them to sit and watch a movie that he found interesting or entertaining, and that he would expect a full report the very next day. Alex's father liked to do the same. He would wake Alex in the middle of the night, bring him down to the living room where they would secretly watch Western cowboy movies while the rest of the house slept. He thought about that now as the sleeping boy softly snored in the back seat. He reminisced that he was about the same age when his father disappeared. He had not watched a Western movie since. But here he was with a real live Indian hostage, and all he was missing now was the cowboy hat. They'd gotten as far as the Canadian border, crossing at one of the many farm roads that normally only saw a tractor or a pickup truck. Not every road can be monitored by the border guards, and Alex was banking on that. What he didn't expect was the vigilante farmer that came after him in the pickup truck, chasing him all the way into Canada. Well, it was early morning and just before dawn. Alex had fired a shot at him, which helped to slow the farmer down a little. There was a possibility that he'd gotten close enough to see Alex's license plate. Well, he'd finally ditched the pickup, but then, no more than a few miles up the road, he'd gotten a flat tire. Cursing his bad luck at realizing there was a spare but no jack, he knew he'd have to wait till he could flag down a passing motorist, and he hoped that it wouldn't be that pickup that had chased him into Canada. After what seemed like hours, a car finally pulled over to assist him. Alex used the jack from the car and quickly changed the tire. Finally, they were back on the road and headed toward Banff. Another 50 miles up the road, the check engine light had come on. Alex stopped at the next gas station, and while filling up the car with gasoline, he noticed a strange burning smell coming from the engine. Well, he looked under the hood, but no smoke was coming from the engine or the radiator. He slammed the hood closed and drove on. Another several miles went by before Alex started noticing smoke coming up through the dashboard. By the time it caught his eye, the smell of the burning electrical wires filled the cab. Smirnoff quickly pulled off the road as gray smoke started billowing out of the dash. Thinking that the car might go up in flames in any moment, he quickly opened Joseph's door and pulled the boy out of the car, grabbed his own satchel from the front seat. Now, Alex Smirnoff knew he had just two options. He could flag down help, steal that car and use it to get to Banff, or he could call Jack and have him meet him here, right here, on the side of the road. He wasn't sure just how close he was to Banff anyway, and the way his luck was going, he didn't think either idea sounded really good. Now that the car had cooled down and the smoke had dissipated, he actually considered to try it again. He knew that electrical fires often result in vehicle fires, but considering his other options, he decided it was worth a try. Well, the last stop he'd made for gasoline was in Skookumchuck, so checking his phone map, Alex knew he was about 2.5 hours away from his destination. Now, would the car make it that far? And then what? Muttering swear words in Russian, he told Joseph to climb back into the car. He turned the key in the ignition. There was nothing. The fire had burnt the ignition relay wiring. Alex hit the dash with his fist hard, enough to send a fine crack up the Naugahyde. Joseph flinched as Alex yelled, "You sit here and don't move, I'll get us a different car." He slammed the door and he opened the hood, hoping some unsuspecting and kind traveler might see him stranded on the side of the road and offer some help. Several cars sped by, not even looking in his direction. Well, Alex decided he'd light a cigarette, try to calm his nerves. The highway, see, it was busy this time of day, people commuting to and from Calgary or farther north or to the west. He would miss his designated meeting time with Jack, of that he was sure. And even if someone did stop to help, chances are it would be difficult to shoot them and steal their car without being noticed. Worst case scenario would be a Mountie stopping along. Alex had already seen a few of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police cruisers passing by and feared that one might just stop to offer help. Now that would not end well at all, he thought, as he contemplated just what to do. It didn't matter to him if he shot a cop, but doing it in broad daylight on a busy road would lead to more trouble than he was just ready for. Now, Joseph Red Hawk had received a phone call from Jack just shortly after telling him that his grandson had been kidnapped. "Smirnoff isn't willing to let that boy go until he gets the jewels from Sasha," Joe told him. "She's got the jewels with her, and we will do everything in our power to keep your grandson safe. Now, Smirnoff has promised to release him to us unharmed as soon as the jewel is in his possession. He said he will not cut off Joseph's fingers or harm him in any way as long as he gets what he wants. Now, please, all I can say is try not to worry. We will get your grandson back to you, all in one piece. This whole thing about the Windigo, well, he's just fooling with you. He's not going to eat Joseph. Red Hawk wanted to know where and when they would call a meeting. Jack told him the location and said he would call immediately as soon as his grandson was in their care. Joseph Red Hawk returned his phone to his pocket and stepped outside. And once again, he faced the 4 cardinal directions, asking for protection for his grandson and a prayer for safe travels. He got into his old 55 Chevy pickup and headed for Canada. After driving through the night and crossing the Canadian border at dawn, Red Hawk knew he was getting close. He could feel his grandson was near, whether it was pure luck or divine intervention that brought him up that stretch of Highway 93. At exactly the right moment can only be left to speculation. He saw the car pulled off the side of the road, and he felt drawn to it like a moth is drawn to the light. Smirnoff watched as the pickup slowly pulled up behind him. He felt relieved that someone was finally stopping to assist. It surprised him, however, that no one was getting out of the truck. He pulled his shirt over the gun in his belt and he walked towards the pickup. "Well, I'll be damned if it isn't the old man himself," Smirnoff commented as he looked at Joseph Red Hawk sitting there. "I want to see my grandson," Red Hawk said. Smirnoff chuckled. "Okay, old man. Looks like you'll be driving us to Banff." Not wanting to turn his back on Red Hawk, he suggested the old man walk over to the car and get his grandson. He made sure Red Hawk saw the gun in his belt, and together they walked to the car. Joseph Two Ravens was sitting in the back seat with hands and legs bound. "Grandfather," he cried out loud when he saw the old man open the back door of the car. "Untie him," Red Hawk demanded. "He won't run." He checked Two Ravens' fingers to make sure they were all there. "Did he hurt you?" he asked. Two Ravens shook his head no. The 3 piled into Red Hawk's pickup, leaving the broken-down rental car sitting on the side of the road. "Interesting turn of events," Jack told Sasha as he walked back to the truck where she was waiting with the dogs. "I just got off the phone with Smirnoff. Apparently, his car broke down on 93, and him and Joseph were waiting there for someone to come along and help, stranded on the side of the road. A pickup drove up, and lo and behold, it was Joseph Red Hawk. So now they're all in Joe's old pickup truck heading right up here. So we have a new plan now. Now, I didn't like the idea of meeting him in broad daylight anyway, so now we're all going to meet, all 3 of them, tonight at Moraine Lake. Now, I'm surprised Joe's old truck brought him this far. I offered to change our meeting locations, but Joe was insistent that we meet right here. That old man's got something up his sleeve. Smirnoff wants us to give him the diamond in exchange for both Red Hawk and Two Ravens. Thing is, they're in Red Hawk's truck, so I don't know how he thinks he's leaving here. He probably plans on taking the old man's truck, or ours. Anyway, I don't plan on letting him leave here alive, and I'm pretty sure old Red Hawk's got the same idea." Joseph Red Hawk was driving the speed limit and refused to drive faster even when he was threatened. He explained the old truck just wouldn't go any faster. Two Ravens sat in the middle with Smirnoff on the end, his gun in his hand and pointing it towards the other 2. And out of the corner of his eye, he could see Smirnoff's eyes fluttering just a bit. He started a story in his sing-song voice, a legend of his people. It didn't take long for the melodic rhythm of his voice to put Smirnoff to sleep. "I will tell you a story of my people. Winter has come early to the northern forests, blanketing the land in a thick, suffocating silence. The people of the small village huddled together, whispering stories of old around their campfires. Among these tales, none was more chilling than that of the windigo, the spirit of insatiable hunger. According to the elders, the windigo was once a man, consumed by the cold and driven mad by starvation. In his desperation, he turned to cannibalism, and for this unspeakable sin, he was cursed to wander the forest forever. The windigo's hunger could never be satisfied, and its craving for human flesh grew with each passing day. One particularly brutal winter, the village faced a food shortage. Hunting parties returned empty-handed, and the storerooms were nearly bare. The elders warned the villagers to stay close to their homes and keep their fires burning, for the Wendigo was known to prey upon the desperate and the weak. Now among the villagers was a young hunter named Kitchi. Determined to save his people, Kitchi set out into the forest alone, vowing not to return without food. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around him, their bare branches like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, and the silence was broken only by the crunch of snow beneath his feet. Days passed with no sign of game. Exhausted and starving, Kitchi began to despair. It was then, in the dim light of dusk, that he saw a flicker of movement. Ahead, partially obscured by the trees, was a deer. It was gaunt and weak, but it was a chance Kitchi couldn't afford to miss. He nocked an arrow and took aim, his hands trembling from hunger and cold. And just as he was about to release the arrow, a chill ran down his spine. From the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow moving swiftly among the trees. He turned, and there it was. A towering figure with eyes that glowed like embers and a mouth twisted into a ghastly grin. It was the Wendigo. Kitchi's blood ran cold as the creature approached, its breath a cloud of frost. He could see the remnants of what might have been human buried beneath layers of decay and hunger. Kitchi's heart pounded in his chest. He remembered the stories, the warnings. Summoning all his courage, he turned and he fled. He ran blindly through the forest, his breath ragged, his legs burning with exhaustion. At last, he stumbled into a clearing and he collapsed, his body unable to go any further. The night closed in around him, and he knew he would not survive until morning. But as he lay there waiting for the end, he felt a warmth spreading through his body. He opened his eyes to see the spirit of the forest, a great stag with antlers that seemed to touch the stars. The stag bowed his head and touched Kitchi with its nose, and he felt strength returning to his limbs. "Rise, Kitchi," the stag said, its voice like the rustle of leaves. When Kitchi awoke, the stag was gone, but the clearing was filled with deer. He gathered what he could and made his way back to the village, his heart full of gratitude and awe. The villagers rejoiced in his return, and the food he brought sustained them throughout the winter. The story of Kitchi's encounter with the Wendigo and the spirit of the forest was told for generations, a reminder of the dangers of desperation and the power of courage and respect for nature. And though the Wendigo's hunger could never be sated, it was said that those who remembered the old ways would always find a way to survive the darkest of winters. Joseph Red Hawk finished his story and glanced toward the Russian, who was sound asleep, leaning his head against the window and snoring. The gun, however, was still held tightly in his hand. Darkness had swept over the land, and the last remnants of alpenglow clung to the peaks of the distant mountains, casting a faint, eerie light over the snow-covered peaks. There was still the late spring chill in the air. Jack and Sasha sat by the campfire in silence, just waiting for the truck lights to appear. The flicker of the flames cast long shadows that added to the ominous atmosphere. Sasha held the diamond in her hand, occasionally holding it up to the firelight and letting the refracted prisms dance across her hand and up her arms as Jack sat nearby, watching and waiting. Finally, the distinct sound of the old pickup crunching gravel and dirt under its tires filled the silence. "It's time," he said quietly. He rose from his seat and he walked into the dark woods, leaving Sasha sitting by the fire. They had discussed how this would go down. Everything was perfectly planned. The old pickup came to a halt on the narrow road to the campsite. Sasha stood with her back to the fire, watching the three climb out of the truck. And as Alex gripped Joseph Two Raven's arm tightly, pulling him slightly in front of him, The old grandfather stepped out of the truck, stretched his legs, and ambled over to the fire, greeting Sasha with a hug. She whispered one word into his ear. "Wolf." The old man nodded his head. He understood exactly what she meant. "Where's Jack?" Smirnoff asked, glancing around quickly, anticipating gunplay. "He'll be right back. He thought you were going to be a bit longer. He just went to gather more firewood over by the lake," Sasha says. "We were originally camped down there, but we moved up here higher so it'd be easier for you to find us." Smirnoff pointed the gun towards Sasha. "Where's the diamond?" "I have it right here," she replied. "You can have it. I never wanted it. I was just keeping it safe for Peter. I never intended on keeping it." She held the diamond out in her hand for him to see it. But as he took a step towards her, she quickly snatched it close to her body. "First, you have to release Joseph. Let him come stand over here by the fire with his grandfather, and I will throw the diamond to you. Then you can take it and you can leave. Of course, you don't have a car, so I suppose you're planning on taking Joe's?" "I will take Jack's truck," Smirnoff replied. Sasha had anticipated that answer. "The keys are in the truck and the tank is full of gas." Alex walked over to Jack's truck, still training the gun on Sasha's and holding Joseph's arm, and looked inside. The keys were in the ignition. The truck was empty of gear. He stood, glancing at Sasha suspiciously. "I will wait until Jack returns." Sasha had also anticipated that answer. "He won't be long. There's an extra chair if you wish to sit." She'd hoped that he'd take the diamond and let go of Joseph, giving Jack an easier target. Jack wouldn't attack if he thought Joseph might get hurt. Red Hawk sensed what was needed and carried 2 chairs over, setting Joseph's fold-up camp chair a short distance away from Alex's. Looking off into the distance, he thought he saw 2 glowing eyes watching, and quickly looked away, not wanting to draw attention. He returned to sit beside Sasha. "Well, he's taken a long time coming back with the firewood," Smirnoff commented. Glancing around, he heard a slight rustle in the brush. Just then, the wood in the campfire popped loudly, and Smirnoff jumped. He was on edge. A low, ominous growl echoed from the darkness beyond the firelight. Alex stiffened, his eyes darting towards the sound. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, glancing around nervously. Sasha looked at Red Hawk. "I didn't hear anything, did you?" "No," Red Hawk replied, looking at his grandson across the fire. "Joseph, did you hear anything?" he asked the boy. "Nope, not a thing except for the fire crackling," he replied. Another growl came from the darkness of the trees. Louder this time, and closer. Alex pointed his gun in the direction of the sound, dropping his hand from the grip that held Joseph. The boy jumped up and ran to his grandfather. Alex whipped around with his gun as he saw 2 glowing eyes coming at him through the darkness. He fired his pistol once, twice, but now he heard the growl again, and turning, he fired the 3rd time toward the sound. Suddenly, he could make out a large, hulking figure coming towards him. It was a wolf, but not like any Alex had ever seen in Russia. It stood on 2 legs, its fur matted and dark, its yellow eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He pointed his gun at the wolf and fired, but it dropped to all 4s and leaped towards him. Its mouth curled into a snarl, revealing sharp, glistening teeth. Alex screamed. He had heard stories of werewolves, but he had never believed them. Now, faced with the impossible, he felt a wave of terror crash over him. He turned and ran, hoping the creature would attack the others, allowing him to escape. But the creature's growls echoed behind him. The forest blurred as he ran, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could hear the werewolf chasing him, crashing through the underbrush, gaining on him. His legs burned with effort. But as he pushed himself harder, tearing through the trees and the bushes, away from the flickering light of the campfire and towards the lake, he turned and fired again in the direction of the sound. But he couldn't see the wolf, and his shots just rang through the trees. Jack let him run, enjoying the pursuit. It felt strangely good. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced before. The hunter pursuing his prey. At the edge of the lake, Smirnoff saw several canoes tethered to the bank and ran to one, fumbling with the rope to get it untied. Jack watched from a short distance away, letting the man think he could escape. And just as he was about to climb into the canoe, Jack grabbed him from behind and lifted him out of the water. With one quick bite, Alex's neck was torn open. The headless body fell into the water, and Alex Smirnoff's head was thrown deep into the middle of the lake. Jack washed the blood off his face and hands and let out a mighty howl. Sasha, Red Hawk, and Two Ravens looked at each other. They knew that the deed was done. Jack paddled the headless body out to the middle of the lake and dumped it in the water. He knew the body might eventually rise to the surface, as many dead bodies do once they've begun to decompose. But it would likely only fuel the stories of the Wendigo and the Wahila that were known to haunt this part of the country and leave their headless victims in the lake. This might not be the Nahanni Valley with its mysterious Valley of the Headless Men, but Lake Moraine was as good a place as any to dump a body and propagate a myth. As dawn broke the following morning, the first light of the sun spilled over the jagged peak, casting a golden hue across the still turquoise waters of the lake. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers that had just begun to bloom. The morning dew glistened like tiny jewels in the early sunlight. The reflections of the snow-capped peaks in this gentle lapping water of Lake Moraine was so perfect that it felt as if you were looking into another world. Red Hawk and Two Ravens sat by the campfire, sipping hot coffee and savoring the beauty around them. They watched as the sky transitioned from the soft pastels of dawn to a brilliant azure. It was a good morning to be alive. Jack slept soundly, sleeping off the events of the previous night. Sasha watched his chest rise and fall with his breath. She was relieved to know Smirnoff was gone and the diamond was safe, but she also knew someone else would come next, that she'd always be chased if she didn't rid herself of the jewel. She held it in her hands, holding it up to the light, and watching as the prisms created rainbows of color that danced around the walls of the tent. There was something about the gem that held her spellbound, and she thought of the one ring that binds them all from The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which she had read as a young girl. It had been translated to Russian after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and she just loved that story. She thought of how the ring had changed Gollum and wondered how this diamond might change her. She wondered if it already had. Jack stirred slightly, caught up in a dream of running and pursuing his prey. Sasha reached over and gently touched his shoulder. Her touch calmed him. She gently moved the lock of hair that had fallen into his eyes and smiled. He was her protector, her champion, and she finally felt safe and happy. They would leave now for Alaska and on to new adventures. What Sasha didn't realize was the profound effect the hunt had on Jack. The excitement of the chase, the satisfaction of the kill, and the hunger for more.